Welcome everybody. My name is David Blevins, and I'm here to present Apache TomEE. Before I get started about myself and all that stuff, let me ask you some questions about yourself. So who uses Tomcat? Raise your hand. Okay, the entire audience, that's pretty common. Who also uses another app server like JBoss or Glassfish? About half the room. Yeah, it's usually more about 3/4 the room, but it's a pretty common theme. You tend to get as far as you can on Tomcat, and then where it falls short, you end up having to use another app server like Glassfish or JBoss because sometimes it can be too difficult to build all those things up on Tomcat yourself. That's precisely what TomEE is about. So what is Apache TomEE? And let me just, before I say TomEE, I myself have been working in the JavaEE space for, I guess, maybe 10 plus, almost 15 years. Since '99 when we started Apache OpenEJB, and then Geronimo, and I've been working on the EE specifications since 2004 or so. EJB 3.0 was my first set of JavaEE specifications, then later EE6, and now EE7, which is just as completed. And so having worked in this space for a really long time, I just felt that the whole world used Tomcat. And so to try and sell people anything else was just pushing a rock up a hill. So why not take Tomcat and finish it? I mean, EE specifications and various technologies have progressed over the years, and Tomcat has stayed the same. Not for the lack of people needing more things like JAX-RS and JPA, and not that these things don't have better integration than what's there in Tomcat. So we decided to go ahead and let's put Tomcat in the same realm as all the other Java app servers. So what is TomEE? It's a Java EE6 web profile certified stack. It's pronounced TomEE, not TomEE. It's TomEE, like the name. You may know someone called Tommy, and they probably think this app server is pretty cool. It's Tomcat through and through. So our very, 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 very core aspect of it is to not mess with Tomcat. So if we've done something, to mess with that experience, it's not what we want. It's all Apache components that we've added to Tomcat. So OpenJPA, OpenWebBeans, OpenEJB, MyFaces, Bean validation, CXF, and ActiveMQ. And then our core values that really focus the project, and I think these are, kind of an interesting and unique perspective amongst app servers specifically, is be small. So we don't want to offer the world another large app server. I don't think there's much of a need for that. There's plenty of good app servers out there, but they're fairly big in size. TomEE is small, very small. Be certified, so unlike when you put all this stuff together on Tomcat yourself, it's not certified. What certified means is that there's a very large test suite that you have to pass. When you integrate all the stuff together, you have to run these tens of thousands of tests that are provided by Oracle. And then when you do that, you're certified. And then of course, be Tomcat. So if we've done something to mess with the Tomcat experience, then we've done we've done something seriously wrong. We've violated one of the core tenets of the project. So if your app runs on Tomcat and it doesn't run on TomEE, that's a big issue. So please let us know, and then we will fix that immediately. We take those into the highest level of severity. So, as a lot of this hinges on what is, that TomEE is a web profile certified server, the question is, of course, what is the web profile? So who has actually heard of the web profile already? All right, so who's heard of JavaEE just in general? Okay, everybody, of course. So, you know how people would say JavaEE is big and bloated? And in some regards, they were correct. And so what we did in EE6, at the specification level is what we decided to do is create another version of JavaEE that is basically half the size of JavaEE, the full profile. So this smaller version is called the web profile. And the web profile cuts out a lot of the legacy technologies and allows vendors to create certified servers that are half the size of these big bloated legacy systems. So when you talk to somebody and they say JavaEE is big and bloated, blah, 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 ask them the question, have you heard of the web profile? If they say no, stop listening to everything they have to say. If they say yes, then definitely listen to what they have to say and communicate that back to me, and we'll try and make sure that that feedback reaches the specifications. So what is cut out that is in the full profile that is not in the web profile? Some big examples of that are Corba, CMP entity beans. If you've ever had to work with CMP entity beans, I apologize. JAX RPC, if you ever had to work with that, I'd apologize 3 times more. I've had to implement all these things, and I can tell you how much of a bear they are. The predecessor or the successor to these technologies are, of course, JAX WS replaces JAX RPC, JPA replaces CMP entity beans, and Corba, just no one uses that anymore. We're all into text-based type of stuff like JAX RS. Unfortunately, in JavaEE 6, the web profile is missing some good technologies. Those are listed down the bottom. JAX RS is a really important technology. That's actually now in the web profile in JavaEE 7. JAX WS, which is SOAP in various types of XML web services, that's in the full profile. We do have a version of TomEE with it in it. JMS is still very useful technology. It's only in the full profile, not in the web profile, but of course we do have a version of TomEE with it in there. And then connectors, which is something people don't really hear a lot about because it was sort of one of those specifications that was a good idea that never went anywhere. We've revised that quite a bit in JavaEE 7 and fixed it up, and so that's now going to be a very important part of JavaEE going forward. That's not in the web profile. Flavors of TomEE. So to address these basic kind of levels of need, we have 3 versions of TomEE. So the first one is the web profile. Contains the minimum set of technologies required to pass the JavaEE 6 web profile TCK. So we don't go over that by any significant margin so that you can have the smallest level of components and still have a certified portable server. So other vendors like Red Hat, Oracle, IBM, they all have web profile certified servers, and you can port your applications from those or to and from TomEE, to them or from them to TomEE. Then we also have TomEE JAX RS, which was sort of a forward-thinking type of distribution. We anticipated that JAX RS would be added to the web profile, so we wanted basically what would be the web profile in JavaEE 7. So that's TomEE JAX RS. It's all the previous technologies plus the JAX RS, which is supplied by CXF, Apache CXF. And then we have Apache TomEE Plus, which is basically the rest of the stuff that's useful, that's in the full profile but not in the web profile. So it contains JAX WS, connector, and JMS. We haven't seen anybody ask for a single technology outside this group. We've never seen anybody ask for CMP. We've never seen anybody ask for Corba. Certainly no one's ever asked for JAX RPC. And we find this meets a lot of requirements. The really interesting thing is that in JavaEE 7, as much as JavaEE 6 was about shrinking JavaEE to make the web profile, JavaEE 7 is about, a lot of it is about shrinking the full profile in some regards. So a lot of the things that I mentioned that are in the full profile that are quote-unquote non-used legacy technologies, those are now cut in JavaEE 7. So CMP is no longer a required part of JavaEE 7 full profile, and neither is JAX RPC and Corba. So we might actually see a version of TomEE that's full profile certified, but yet still small. Okay, let me give a quick demo here. So with this demo, I want to show TomEE running in Eclipse using the Tomcat web adapter. What's that? The distribution? Yeah, Apache, the software foundation. Yeah. Yeah, so Apache received a license for the JavaEE TCK in 2004 when Geronimo was created. And so Geronimo certified with that TCK for several years, and then we used it as well when certifying TomEE. So Apache actually has 2 certified JavaEE implementations. So yeah, it's donated to Apache by Oracle. And so yeah, we're one of the 4 or 5, vendors with the, yeah, right, exactly. So quick question, who uses Eclipse? Okay, most of the room. And I'm guessing you all use the Tomcat adapter with Eclipse? Yep, of course, all right. So as I mentioned, that TomEE is Tomcat with stuff added to it. And the advantage of that is that all the Tomcat tools work with TomEE. You don't have to learn a new server. And so in this demo, I want to show you from scratch setting up Eclipse. With TomEE. So I'm just going to extract Eclipse right off the disk, right off the zip file or the tar. And then we'll open that up. Or let's just extract TomEE also. And this is the plus version of TomEE. This is the largest version of TomEE. So I'm showing you the heaviest thing we have to offer, not the lightest. I think that's only fair. You can assume that that everything else is a little bit faster and a little bit lighter from this one. And I guess before we boot up Eclipse here, I want to show you just TomEE itself and how you boot it. So you probably can't see that. There you go. Is this readable by everyone? Okay, great. So first of all, you start up TomEE like you start up Tomcat. We haven't changed anything significant about Tomcat. We haven't removed anything. So you boot it up just like you normally would. There we go, and there's the Tomcat splash page. So just the same as usual. We have a little GUI here in the bottom that's currently protected. There's not much there in the moment, but it's one of the things that we're developing, kind of a console type of thing for TomEE. And then I'll shut this down. And you shut down via the same shutdown script. Okay, now we'll boot up Eclipse here. And of course, it always takes a little bit of time to start. Okay. We'll create a temporary workspace. So that way, you can see that I haven't created a workspace in advance and taken all the fun out of the demo. All right. So the first thing we'll do is we'll say, new dynamic web project. You do not select enterprise project. The reason being is in JavaEE 6, we changed some things about JavaEE that have been big problems for a number of years. You don't need EAR files anymore in JavaEE 6. Those are pretty much legacy. In JavaEE 6, we made it so you can put everything in the WAR file. You can put your EJBs in the WAR file, you can put your persistence units in the WAR file, and they all share the same class loader, and it's all very simple, and you don't have to create all these little modules and bind them all together in an EAR file and create yourself an application XML file. It's pointless. And then they have different class loaders, so if you have a class that needs to be shared by an EJB and a servlet, then you need to put that class in a separate jar and move that into the EAR file lib directory, and at this point everyone wants to pull their hair out and kick their computer and walk out of the door screaming. So no more of that. Everything's in the WAR file. Everybody knows how to build a WAR file. Done. End of story. So we're going to select Dynamic Web Project. And we'll call it JAX-conf. And then here we go, setting up TomEE. You say new runtime, Apache Tomcat 7. And we'll put a little tag on here called TomEE. It's not necessary, but just nice to see if you have a few different versions of things in there. We navigate to where we unzipped TomEE, and then we simply say open. And then we say finish. We'll leave all the defaults, Servlet 3.0, and we say finish. Okay, and then we close this. All right. So now we'll go ahead and create some code here. And we'll right-click on, and we'll say new servlet. We'll call it hello servlet. That's the Java package. I always do that. Okay, and then we'll say finish. Now, of course, Eclipse likes to generate all this boilerplate code, which is complete nonsense. Although if you get paid by the line of code, it's a really, really good bargain. All right, I forget how to maximize this. There we go. Okay, so we're just going to delete all this stuff. All right, and then we'll just have it return some set content type, text HTML. Oops. Hello, servlet. Okay, and then to run this, we go back to this window here. And we right-click on our servlet. We say run as, run on server. Now we'll pop open this dialog box. Let's just click always use the server so we don't have to see this dialog box again. And then we say finish. And now it will boot up TomEE, deploy the application, and pop open our web page. There it was. Fairly quick too. Basically, this is Tomcat speeds with all the additional stuff in it. So that's basically using TomEE. That's using Tomcat, but we haven't seen anything that Tomcat can't normally do. So let's go off and try something that isn't normally possible with Tomcat. So we're going to add an EJB. So here we'll say new class, and we'll call it hello bean. Say finish. Now we'll annotate it. JavaX EJB singleton. And then we'll make a method here. And have it return string hello EJB. Okay. Now, to get a reference to our EJB into our servlet, we simply make a private field of type hello bean. And then we annotate it with JavaX EJB, and if I could type today, that'd be wonderful, EJB. Okay. And we'll go ahead and update our output here. Just making a local variable. I like hotkeys. Writer append. And we'll have it return okay. Now when we save this, Eclipse should notice that the servlet's changed and go ahead and redeploy the application for us. There it goes, it noticed and it redeployed. And now we can go back to our web page, which is over here, and refresh. There we go. Hello servlet, hello EJB. We haven't had to chase down any libraries. We haven't had to read any blog posts on how to integrate this stuff. We haven't had to do all the normal things that we normally have to do when we're working with Tomcat because it's basically bare bones. So there's a lot more in the box. This is the full pro. This is basically the TomEE Plus version, which is very close to full profile. So let's do some web services. Okay, so I annotate my EJB with JavaEE web service, and now it's both a local EJB and a remote web service. So I'll go ahead and ping my servlet here, and so that will cause Eclipse to notice the file's changed and reload. Any second now. There it goes, and it reloaded. Okay, so first thing to notice, and this may be difficult to see for the people in the back, I'll try and, is at the bottom, there is the web service address. We log that for every web service so that you don't have to guess it or go searching around Google for documentation and guessing it and typing it in and getting it wrong. So we're just going to copy this. Go to our web browser. And there we go. We have full WSDL for our now completely new web service. And we haven't had to generate anything. We haven't had to go build anything. We just simply annotate that component with @webService. And now we have JAX-WS web services completely. We can invoke this bean now remotely over HTTP or locally in the server via just a reference. And we can do transactions and security. And in fact, an interesting aspect of TomEE is how fully integrated everything is. So not only did you not have to go read the CXF blog post on how to set CXF up into Tomcat and so on and so forth, but we've gone to the additional lengths of making sure that even things like web service security works on top of Tomcat realms. So if you have supplied your own Tomcat realm to persist users to your own database, for example, you can use web services security and those users to log in via web service and authenticate. So you actually have full control over the security via the web services because of the way we've done the integration. This is normally not even possible when you take, for example, Spring and CXF and throw it in Tomcat. It doesn't use the Tomcat security. It uses all the Spring security. It doesn't have that integration. And that's part of our focus, to keep Tomcat as, top dog, as king of the hill. Everything that you do with Tomcat, you should still be able to do and more. Okay. So that's EJB, JAX-WS. Let's add some RESTful stuff. So we annotate it with the path component, which is the sort of, now this makes it a RESTful service. We'll give it a path of REST. And now we have to annotate this method here to let us know that we can use a GET request to access this method. We just say GET, and now we're done. We'll go hit our servlet again. And then, of course, it should notice and reload, and yes, it's done. And just like the web service, all the RESTful service URLs are, of course, also logged. So here it is, REST service, and that's the URL. So we'll grab that, we'll paste that into our browser, and now we get hello EJB. The default producer type for REST is text, but of course with some additional annotations you can easily have this return JSON, XML, whatever you want, all of the above. You can really add an unlimited number of return types on the same method with JAX-RS, which is one of the most amazing things about JAX-RS is the amount of time it can save you. So, 2 Java classes in our project, and we have servlets, EJB, JAX-WS, JAX-RS, all fully integrated. We haven't had to go, thanks, we haven't had to go, anybody need a water? We haven't had to go search around blog posts. We haven't had to hunt down any libraries. We haven't had to go, oh, this blog post is incomplete. Did you ever try doing this? No, I didn't need that, so I only went this far. Well, I need to go this far. And now you're at square one again. You know, this is the problem with doing things like this, building your own app server, as I call it. The difficult thing becomes when you've put all the time to building it, so you don't really want to back away from it, but then a new technology comes out, and now you don't know anything about that technology, but you know you want to try it out, and you know you want to use it, but now you have to learn it and figure out how to integrate it into Tomcat all at the same time. And this becomes a really, really, really hard thing to do. Your job is never done. As technology is going to keep moving forward, you're always going to be building that app server. And a good example of that is CDI. It came out in JavaEE 6. Lots of people are interested in it. A lot of people want to check it out, but simply it's not in the server that they use because maybe they're using Tomcat or Jetty. Who's heard of CDI? One hand? Okay. So CDI is basically a new technology in JavaEE 6. CDI is to Spring and Juice what JPA is to Hibernate. CDI is the standard version of a lot of dependency injection ideas that were added and created in projects like Juice and Spring. Those were fixed up, standardized, and then added to JavaEE as a core technology. And in fact, a lot of the platform itself is moving on to CDI. The interesting thing about CDI is not necessarily the dependency injection. I think that's sort of an old concept, and it's really cool and important. But one thing, if it's right, I don't have time to show it to you, but write it down for research later. The CDI event model is the best I've ever seen. It will change the way you want to write code. Once you learn it, you'll instantly think of a bunch of places that you can use it, and you'll want to rewrite all your applications in a really good way. It's a listening concept. It's been around for a decade and a half, right? But the interesting thing about it is that you do not need to create or register these listener managers and then go register this object with this listener manager. You simply create a method that says @observes and say type foo. Then somebody else can grab the CDI bean manager and say, fire this event and pass in a new foo. Well, end of story, your component will get invoked when that happens. But you haven't had to create a little registry to register all these listeners, and you haven't had to then go and every new component you add that wants to listen for foo has to be registered. And it's actually even inheritance aware. So if you want to say observe object, you will see all events in the whole system. It will make you want to rewrite all of your code. If you're doing anything loosely coupled, it's a perfect application for it. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and add some CDI functionality to our web app so you can see how that's done. So the first thing you need to do is you need to add a new file called the beans XML file. You don't need to have anything in it, but its presence turns CDI on, and it has to be in the web inf directory of your WAR file. And now we can go and create another Java object. We'll call it hello Pojo. Okay, and then we're going to do a similar thing. We're going to make a public method here. Call hello, and it's going to return okay. Now we're not going to annotate this with anything. This is a plain old Java object. Go back to our servlet. And in a similar fashion, the dependency injection works. Private hello Pojo. And then we annotate it with JavaX inject, inject. And when we do this, it will cause TomEE to see that, grab the Pojo, inject it into our servlet, and then we can go ahead and use it. And we'll update our output to do a similar thing. Now we save that, and it should cause Eclipse to notice and redeploy, which it did. I'll go back to our web page, which is up here somewhere. There we go. Hello, Pojo. So now we have plain old dependency injection, Spring-like, but we haven't had to add any libraries. There's no complexity we have to have. We didn't need to define the bean in XML. And we didn't need to do anything. If you notice, we haven't really written any XML, but we still have a full XML web services. We still have JAX-RS. We have full EJB functionality with transaction support and security support. We have full dependency injection. We haven't added any libraries, and we haven't had to set up any configuration files, and we haven't added even a web XML file. Nothing. All set up for you right off the bat, very fast, with the normally of weeks of time that you would spend working on this stuff, getting it to go like this. It's in my mind a game changer. You know, it's what we've been trying to do for the last 10 years. I mean, everybody and their brother's been adding more to Tomcat. There is nobody. I mean, let me ask the question: who uses Tomcat and doesn't add any third-party libraries to their applications? Right, of course. I mean, that would be absurd. It's, you know, we haven't added any third-party libraries to our application so far. That's the advantage of using a server with more in it. You can have lighter web applications. But, you know, it's pretty significant in how it changes the way you would normally approach things. And the great thing about it is that this application that we've written, it's just 3 Java classes. It's portable to JBoss, it's portable to Glassfish, it's portable to WebSphere. If you decide you don't like TomEE, you can port these things away. And on the reverse, if you have had to use these servers alongside Tomcat, now you can finally move them all onto Tomcat and have everything on one server. So some interesting kind of fun things about where TomEE came from. So we announced it in 2011 at Java 1. That was the very first certified server that we had. That was that was the first release, and the first time we passed the JavaEE TCK. We announced it at Java 1, and we got a really big response from that. In April, we did our 1.0 final release. We did a lot of performance tuning between the beta and the 1.0. But the first iteration was focused on feature complete. And then we called that beta. We went to fast and performance. That was 1.0. Then between that and the next following 6 months, we completely focused on, you know, filling gaps because people try to port applications from other places to TomEE, and then we discover we need a bunch of features that are not part of the standard. So we did a lot of gap filling, and we bumped the version up significantly, taking a page from Tomcat, 5.0 and 5.5 type of numbering system. And then just this last April, we did another, our most latest dot release is probably the most stable and mature by far. We've received lots of feedback. So basically, every 6 months, we're focusing on something very, very significant to move it forward. It's taken, I guess, year and a half or so, but we have something that's, very, very stable and very mature. You can kind of see the what our life has been like since we announced. That little bump in the middle is our Java 1 announcement, and we've just sort of been going crazy since then. That's our website traffic. That's our user list traffic, so we get slammed on a regular basis. And then we just got TomEE into Jelastic here this last March. And our first month in Jelastic, we got 7% of their market share, which is really crazy. We didn't expect that. Nobody did. Jelastic didn't expect it. We didn't expect it. That was the first month that we were in Jelastic. The second month, we got 13% of the market share, tying with Glassfish, passing up Jetty. I was very astonished. And as all these look like numbers, I think that it's easy to look at technology as numbers. I just wanted to show my personal significant milestone of the project. This was 2011. This was after we presented TomEE for the very first time at JAX in London. And the week after that conference, we all got together in Toulouse, France, and hacked on TomEE for a week. And we all took vacation to do this, and we all just wanted to do it. And we started out the week at 40% TCK compliant, and we ended the week at 80% TCK compliant. Never happens like that. I've worked on Geronimo for version 1, 2, and 3, major certifications. It takes us months to make that kind of jump, but it's just what happens when you get the right people and the right energy and the right focus. We have a significant advantage in terms of how we run the TCK. We run it in Amazon EC2, so we took a very modern approach to tackling this problem of the TCK. Running tens of thousands of tests takes a long time. So what we did was we took and split them all up into hundreds of chunks of tests. We throw those units of work onto a JMS queue. We fire up 100 spot instances on Amazon EC2, and they all pull down the work and churn it away and put it all back to us. So basically, we can get results in an hour. So during that week, we were able to do 8 complete runs of the TCK. One at lunchtime, after we'd hacked for all morning. Then after we hack all afternoon, we run it again before we go, and we're sitting there having beers watching the TCK results roll in. It's a test suite. It's a compatibility test suite. It's basically what you get as a licensee for JavaEE is you get this test suite. And you're required to pass it before you can say that you're certified. And you have to present that information to Oracle, of course. And then they add you to their website as a certified implementation, and then you get to refer to yourself as certified. If you don't, then they get really mad and the lawyers come at you. Excuse me? Are there performance requirements for passing the TCK? No. And the first requirement, the first question you asked, as I forget I'm being recorded, is what is a TCK? And that's a test suite that you must pass to be a licensed implementation of JavaEE. There are thread security requirements, certainly, multi-threaded requirements and stuff like that, but you're allowed to be as slow as you want to be. We're actually quite light. So when we pass the JavaEE TCK, we pass it with the default 64 megabytes of heap space. We don't increase the memory space at all. We're so far, I've been saying this for almost 2 years, we're the only one who's done it to my knowledge. No one's bothered to challenge us on it, so I'm going to assume that that's the case. I know in the case of Geronimo, we take a gig of memory to pass the TCK, and that's a significant difference. Yeah, so, and actually I've been doing work with running the TCK on a Raspberry Pi just for fun. TomEE actually does run pretty well on a Raspberry Pi, and especially the next release, 1.6. We've done some specific performance tuning for a Raspberry Pi. So here's some of the feedback. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so you got a lot of productivity in that 1 week. Okay, that's impressive. Did you guys have problems with dependencies and packages and support dependencies on packages? I mean, like, how magical was it?
Well, you know, no, we didn't have problems with circular dependencies between packages because the things that we're integrating are distinct projects like OpenWebBeans, OpenEJB, the transaction manager, and they're all very independent. So we actually have the inverse problem, integrating them together. not that they're too integrated. So the whole week there is basically tying knots together, making connections, and that gets you big jumps quick. Now, when I say 40 to 80, here's what it's like to live in the shoes of someone who writes an app server. When you get this huge test suite, it takes you a couple months to get it to running. Then it takes you, that gets you up fast. I mean, you're making big gains. And then that 40 to 80 usually takes a couple months, not a week or so. As you get closer to 100%, it gets incrementally longer to finish that work. And so for us to go from 80 to 100, that took another 6 months. So yeah, it's, but still, our whole certification cycle was about 10 months long. So that's really impressive. I mean, for drama, it's normally taken us at least a year and a half, often longer. So some feedback we've gotten from people since we launched. This is sort of early feedback from our 1.0. TomEE's insanely fast. From an architect switch from XXX to TomEE, I can tell you TomEE kicks XXX butt in every way: memory, speed, reliability, validation. I removed the server names because I think it's crass to trash other servers. We're not about that. If people want to trash other servers, that's their business, but we're not going to do that. And then if you're concerned about performance, footprint, but it can accept that you'll support yourself a little bit, TomEE's great. Actually, we're in the process of fixing that. I'm launching off a support company around TomEE to offer a greater level of support than you can normally get from open source mailing lists. Since our 1.5 release, where we gained a lot more maturity, obviously we're seeing some very different names. An ideal fit for a private cloud, American Express. We have completely replaced XXS with TomEE. At my department, I have no regrets, Condé Nast. An amazingly pure, stable, and simple to manage JavaEE web profile container, Starbucks. So it's...
What about benchmarking?
We compete with JBoss HTTP speed about even because both use Tomcat. EJB speed is double and a half. TomEE's faster than JBoss. JBoss just uses RMI for the remote EJB calls, whereas we use our own socket implementation, significantly faster because we've written it and tuned it. The secret to performance is if you can control the client and the server, you can set the buffer sizes to be exactly the same on both sides, and then you get a much better throughput. It's actually quite simple, but they don't write their own protocol. So we're definitely a lot lighter in terms of memory, where we take about a third to a half of what you would find in a JBoss install. In terms of footprint on disk, TomEE is 27 megabytes in download size, JBoss is 127 megabytes. So it's basically smaller in about every possible way, and speed-wise, it's either equivalent or faster. And so it's pretty great. So as what I showed can look like a lot of magic, here are the steps that we've taken to add these things to Tomcat. We add 2 configuration files into the conf directory. One is just simply there for the convenience. You can add system properties to it, and you don't have to put them as -d flags. Simple. The other one is a TomEE XML configuration file, and that's there simply because there are a lot of things that you can do in a full profile or web profile JavaEE server that you can't configure via the Tomcat server XML, such as JMS topics and queues, your broker, various persistence things, CMP or MDB containers, web service, transaction manager. There's no transaction manager in Tomcat by default, but there is in TomEE, of course. And so we have this additional configuration file. And then, of course, here are the projects that I mentioned in the lib directory of the server. So we do that. We add this listener to the server XML file, and then we basically start when Tomcat starts. We participate in the full life cycle of Tomcat, and that's how we do integration. Tomcat actually is a pretty good event model internally. So when it starts, it says, I'm starting. When it stops, it says, I'm stopping. When it deploys an application, it really gets verbose. I'm going to deploy an application. I'm deploying an application. I have just stopped deploying an application. And then, of course, the opposite and undeploy. So that's enough for us to hook in fully. And when Tomcat is scanning for servlets, we scan for EJBs. We scan for JAX-WS components. Testing. So as I mentioned, we run this stuff into Amazon EC2. We run it on very small machines. So the T1 micro instance that we run on is, it's got 613 megabytes of memory. It's quite small. We don't increase the Java memory, so we're taking the minimum that a Java process can take on that machine, leaving you with a couple hundred megabytes of additional space for your application, which is the way it should be. That means you can run TomEE on a T1 micro instance in Amazon EC2 and basically use the majority of the memory for your application and not have it hogged by the app server. The interesting thing about that is if you can't do that because your app server is too big, you got to go to the next level up, which is the M1, and that's 4 times the price. And of course, we certify all up to C1, and yeah, it's pretty great. We also have a ton of our own tests, and it's pretty significant, the amount of testing that we do. So the results are that this web profile is 27 megabytes. The TomEE Plus version is 47 megabytes, so it's another 20 megabytes to get ActiveMQ in there, to get CXF in there, and to get connector architecture and the additional things. So you basically have your choice between 27 megabytes and 47 megabytes of zip size. It runs with the default memory settings. You don't need to bump up the memory just to start the server or deploy basic applications. And it's tightly integrated, so it's very small. It's very small. It represents, each zip file that you get represents hundreds of hours of testing. I think it's a significant thing to think about. It's easy to focus just on the time saved in terms of integration, which is obviously significant. But each zip file gets hundreds of hours of testing. We run the TCK every single day on TomEE. And so our even trunk is on average 95 to 100% passing. It's really stable. And it's certified. There's portability there. So unlike when you cobble things together yourself on Tomcat, you can't move that to WebSphere or anything else like that. JBoss, you have to rewrite those applications or significantly modify them. And then if you've done the integration yourself, you've often find that your interpretation of the specification was perhaps different than somebody else's interpretation of the specification, and you integrated things differently. And so now you maybe have a significant issue that prevents your application from moving anywhere at all. So some perils of doing it yourself, and I sort of kind of went into there already. There's a performance penalty that people don't really realize. You would normally think seeing all these things added to Tomcat would result in a slower application. But that is only true unless you have not added things to Tomcat yourself. So if we're both adding things to Tomcat, well, then they have effectively similar size libraries. But there's a big difference. That these days, all these libraries we're adding are scanning our web app. That's the way new APIs work in JavaEE. So when you say @path on a JAX-RS component, and that gets discovered and deployed, what that means is that CXF or Jersey has read every single class file in your war, parsed it with like ASM, looked to see if it had @path on it, and then it sets it aside and deploys that. So when you add, say, Jersey to a simple web app, Tomcat will read every single class file and every single jar looking for servlet, @web servlet. Then it's done. And then Jersey gets its turn. Okay, now I'm going to take my shot at really scanning every single class file in this war. And it does the same thing. So if you've got an embedded database in there, that gets scanned. I mean, everything gets scanned. It's very, very blind in how it does it. And then you add JPA in there, and now there are all these @entity components. Now OpenJPA or Hibernate or Eclipse Link, they're going to scan every single class file. You see where I'm going with this. The same is true if you add JSF, there's @managedbean, and then if you add EJB, there's @singleton. If you add JAX-WS, now you have @webservice. All of these things now get scanned multiple times. So the more things you're cramming onto Tomcat, the more inefficient your startup gets. And so this is one of the things that we do differently in our integration. Because we have everything integrated very well, and one of the big things that we did between the beta and the 1.0 was we eliminated all this double scanning and triple scanning and quadruple scanning. So not only are you not scanning it, say, 6 times, your web application, because it doesn't have all those libraries in the web application, is 6 times as small. So that one scan is many times faster than what you would normally get. So that's one significant thing to be aware of. Another thing is that there's a fallacy that if you drop OpenJPA, for example, into Tomcat, that you're getting 100% of JPA functionality. You're not. You cannot use @persistence context in a Tomcat web application that has OpenJPA in it. It's impossible, because that requires a transaction manager, which requires logic to register the entity manager with the transaction manager, and then everybody who uses @persistence context should get the same entity manager injected into them. So if they're all in the same transaction, they're all using the same entity manager, using the same database connection to the same database. That's a lot of integration you just do not get by throwing OpenJPA or Hibernate into Tomcat, which is why everybody who uses plain Tomcat with a JPA provider uses the entity manager factory directly to instantiate their entity managers, and then you have to track them. And then you have to use the JTA entity transaction. And if you have 2 entity managers that you want to coordinate together, guess what? You can't. They're separate. They don't participate in the same transaction. So you couldn't move data from one database to another database using this because they do not share a transaction. Very significant. OpenWebBeans, for example, only runs 60% of the CDI TCK on its standalone implementation of CDI, because the other 40% is all integration. And they're not going to write integration with EJB and JAX-RS and JAX-WS and all that stuff. So these are things that we had to do in TomEE to make it. So it's a fallacy to think that I have OpenJPA, I have my faces, and I have OpenWebBeans in my Tomcat application, so therefore it's the same as TomEE. It's not. It's about half to 60%. When we added all this stuff into Tomcat, before we did any really serious integration work, we were only about 40% compliant, as I mentioned. And it's a lot of work to get from 40 to 100%, and it's a lot more work to get it fast, and it's a lot more work to get it stable, and to keep it tested and well-oiled all the time is a very big amount of work. So I've gone by with the portability stuff. We have just 5 minutes, but I want to show you one real quick thing here. There's a significant testing advantage with JavaEE these days that you may not have been aware of. Normally, JavaEE gets a hit on the chin for being untestable. There's a new testing framework called Arquillian, which is supported by all the JavaEE app servers in JBoss, Glassfish, WebSphere, WebLogic. So write down Arquillian and research this afterwards. I'll show it to you briefly. So here it is at a 10,000 foot. The goal of Arquillian is to allow you to write a test, run it on any server. This has been tried before with projects like Cargo and things like that, but the significant thing that's different about Arquillian is that it has adapters for every single server and it's getting used. And now in JavaEE 7, the CDI TCK is using Arquillian as its testing vehicle. So all the app servers from now forever will have to support Arquillian. So it's safe to invest in it and have it stay there. So what you do is you can use plain old JUnit test. You say @runs with Arquillian. You make plain old @test annotated test methods. And the new twist here is that you build up your application in code and return it to the testing framework. The testing framework will create a WAR file from that and deploy that into the server for you. And then even as a little perk, you don't have to guess the URL that the server's running on, so you don't have to know the ports and you don't have to work out that kind of mechanics that you normally have to deal with. You simply say, Arquillian resource URL, and that will be the URL of the web app itself, all the way right up to the first slash of the web app, including the port, including HTTP, HTTPS, or whatever. So here we've just got a WAR file with 3 simple classes in it. And the great thing about that is that now if I want to swap out, say, one implementation of something for a mocked version, I just specify the mocked version. All right, so I'm going to just go ahead and run these little CDI tests, and you can kind of see the speeds that you're looking at. So we have an Arquillian adapter for an embedded version of TomEE, and there we go. So that ran in 6 seconds, all those tests. This uses the embedded version of TomEE. We have an Arquillian adapter for a separate process running TomEE, a standard booted up server. So you can take that one test that we've written here and you can run it on your local machine on an embedded database, on an embedded server while you're developing. And then you can take that same test and then run it on like a QA server that's running in a completely different section of the network. And you don't have to edit the test because, as I said, all the location information is abstracted from the test. And the test simply builds up a WAR file. And then as you move that to, say, some sort of staging, you could run those tests again. So your tests become a significant asset and resource for you personally, and they're not even TomEE specific. If you decide to go to another server, or you're in a position that you have to support multiple servers because you have some sort of product that you sell that needs to run on many implementations, then Arquillian is a godsend. It's a huge game changer. There's some really great perks about this, about using an embedded server, which TomEE has a wonderful embedded server. It's very much a focus of the project. Embedded technologies, I think, are the future. Running a server as a standalone process where you then boot the server and then deploy an application, that fits for some things. But if you just have one application, take the server, take the application, bundle them together, and just start it as one process. Like you would use an embedded database. Why not? It can provide you with some options that you normally would not get. A great perk of that is it runs as a plain Java SE application. So that's not what I want to do. All right, so we're going to take and put a breakpoint in this servlet. Here we have a servlet with a constructor. Simple servlet extends HTTP servlet, and it's got a constructor. Normally, you don't get constructors injection in servlets, but this is a new feature in JavaEE 7, which is supported in TomEE for about 2 years now. Actually, I was the one who added it to the specs. So we're going to add a breakpoint there, and then we're going to go to our servlet, our test case, and we're going to run it in debug mode. So we go to run this app, and then our code window is very shrunk. There we are. We've stopped at our breakpoint. We haven't had to set up any remote debugging, any booting things on separate ports as a separate command and coming back to the IDE, nothing. We're able to debug this. Here's our car object that's injected. It's a Lexus IS 350. It's, we can see into our application completely, and we haven't had to set up anything different, and it runs just as fast as a standard Java SE application. There is really no reason to avoid heavy technology anymore. That is really of the past. That's no longer the reality. So to invest a considerable amount of time to do it all yourself, to avoid all this heaviness, means now you have to write your own testing framework. You've got to do all the integration testing that's there. And if you upgrade a component and it breaks something, then you've got to fix that. So I normally ask this, and I didn't, but for all the people who have added things to Tomcat, how many of you have written tests for your integration of those technologies. One hand, that's typically the way it goes. So it's not tens of thousands of tests, and it's not all the additional tests that we've written which we've discovered weren't covered by those tens of thousands of tests, 0 tests. So every time something breaks, basically you hope it works, and a lot of times you don't know till production. How many of you have written tests for your applications at all, for your JavaEE applications at all? It's 5 hands, yeah, much less. Much less than it should be. Should be all the hands. This is not just a good way to test your application, it's a good way to develop. I mean, you can write code and just see what it does as you're working. And you don't have to sit and live through those continuous deploy, build, deploy cycles. You can write it as a plain Java SE application as fast as you would a Java SE application, run it as fast as you would a Java SE application. Complete game changer. I mean, there's some really great tools like Zero Turnaround, which make their whole job is, to make deploys faster. Well, if the server doesn't mean that, if the server's running so fast that it's Java SE speed, you don't really need that. And if your test cases are able to control the exact size of your WAR file, then you don't need, you should keep them small so they can be closer to unit tests. You don't want to deploy this whole big WAR file that has all these different functionalities every time for one little test. You want to isolate as much as possible. That's a good tenet of unit testing. This is, I believe, is a turning point for JavaEE. Not TomEE specifically, but just the whole movement. I mean, TomEE is a part of it. But what JavaEE has done with itself in the last just 2 years is huge. This is not the same thing that we had from 2000 to 2010. This is a completely different thing. The only thing that remains the same is the name. And actually that was changed some time ago from J2EE to JavaEE. I encourage everyone to look at JavaEE differently. Look at what you can do on Tomcat differently. Look at the motivation. If I'm doing the same thing on Tomcat that TomEE's doing, what's the advantage of me doing it myself? If you do find an advantage of doing it yourself, of course, let us know, and we'll add that to the project as a part of what we do. We do get that feedback often, actually. Anyway, it's a significant change to the way we normally think of doing work and the way we do work. I really encourage people to try out TomEE and give it a shot. Just a quick thing before we go. Here's some of the vendors who have added support for TomEE in their products in the last year. So we have a TomEE adapter in IntelliJ. JRebel has added support for TomEE in their zero turnaround and in their hot deploy type of functionality. New Relic has support for monitoring applications in TomEE. Staccato has TomEE in their private pass. Of course, I mentioned Jelastic, who has it in their public pass. MetaWorks is sort of a Tomcat hosting company. They've got TomEE in there. And more is added all the time. The secret sauce is that I go up to them and I say, do you support Tomcat? And of course they say yes. And I say, well, then you should add TomEE support. Oh, we don't have the resources to do other integration. Well, if you tried it, no, it's probably going to work because it's Tomcat. And the same thing is true for your environments. If you are running Tomcat, to get TomEE in is easy. You're already set up for it. You don't have to write new tools. You don't have to write new anything. It's good to go. Thank you very much. I hope you enjoyed the presentation, and I hope you enjoy trying out TomEE, and I look forward to your feedback. Thank you.